I said, one of the nice things about this semi glues the gasket to it, so if you can get it to stay on there without making a mess in your pan. It'd be nicer if it was warmer so the gasket wasn't so cold and stiff. That's part of why I do it to the pan instead of doing it to the transmission, because the pan's a whole lot easier to clean up than the transmission is. And now I just got to take this down there and put it back, and I also got to put the filter on, which time for glove change. The filter, if you notice, there's a 1/2-inch bolt that holds it on, and it goes through that hole right there, and there's a spigot down there that goes into. I'll try to show that. I gotta do that from the other side, but I gotta change gloves. We're gonna ignore the fact that the brake booster looks to be wet, and move on to the transmission. But you see the filter here, it's got that spot there. There's an O-ring that goes on that. That just connects in there. Which I don't know if I can do this one-handed. I can't do this one-handed because I don't want to break that. And then there's a bolt hole there and a bolt. And there's the bolt that'll go on that. And I'll see if I can't set it up so you can watch me put this together. And you can see the gasket material already on there. There we go. Got it in. Tighten that gently, because it doesn't necessarily tighten the filter to the transmission. It just holds the filter up. So it's got well, I thought that was 1/2 inch. Did I not grab a 1/2 inch? No, that is 1/2 inch. I have the wrong size. Maybe these aren't 1/2 inch. No, it is 1/2 inch. That 1/2 inch socket's just no longer 1/2 inch. Huh. Put that up there. That's not going to do me any good.
You broke it.
Other way. And like I said, just snug so it won't back out. And that'll hold that. And that's on the thing. So that's it for that. Okay, can you hand me the pan? Grab another bolt. Knock the camera over. Try to set that back up. Maybe you're seeing what I'm doing, maybe not. I put a bolt there, and then I tend to pick a spot down here on this end. Put a bolt. And you'll do the same thing all the way around, hand tightening them. And then once you have them all hand tight, when you torque them, you're going to do a cross at an angle. And just keep going around that way. But since this has this instant glue, the first thing you're going to be doing is just hand tighten it and then coming back in an hour, 2 hours. It says an hour at least. So, and then tightening it down. And then let it cure for at least 24 hours. Fill tube is way back there. It's hard to get to. Used a flex line funnel and just put it between the hood and the opening down into it. And that's made it a whole lot easier. So that'll make filling a lot easier than trying to squeeze in there.
Camera guy's log. Star date. I don't know star dates. We have just put the transmission fluid in the Cherokee, and it stinks to high heaven.
Old transmission fluid. For whatever reason, it always reeked. Light on, there we go. Okay. Well, we found a leak source. That's a new one. Probably the original problem. And that should be the connector for the Speedo. As you can see, it's getting nice and wet now that I put more fluid in. But, when I jacked up to do the tire change, transmission fluid poured off of this cross member. So, there was that. But that's the other source of leak. So I've got to see if I can't fix that. But as far as the transmission, it looks to be dry. I over-tightened the gasket a little bit. So, as always, I'm guesstimating and going off of the fact that my hands don't feel properly, and I over-tightened it a little bit. But it is staying dry. The shiny you see was just on there because the nuts were greasy. But I don't see any liquid coming out. There's no drips. So, at least as of yet, there's no drips. I mean, there's none that I can see anywhere. I don't see any new wet spots other than the two I mentioned. So, I think we're good on this stuff. And I don't see anything there either, so I think that's doing good. So, hopefully, we've got it all fixed. Other than where the cable goes in. So, that's going to be the next thing, is to fix that. And I've also got to take all these tires off, take in, change. So, but yeah, you can see where the gaskets have bulged out a little bit. I over-tightened. I was laying in the middle guesstimating, and I overdid just a hair. Just a hair. That's not unusual. That's part of why I do the glue on the gaskets, too. Because that instant gasket makes an extra layer of seal. I've never been real good at that. Part of that is I don't have real good sensation in my hands, so gauging how much pressure I put on something, and I could not find torque ratings for that. I don't need that light now. I'll turn that off. I could not find torque ratings, so I was guessing. So if you're doing it, you should find the torque ratings. Interesting finding it when you're working on a GM transmission on an AMC product that, and so far it looks like 4.3 liter or 4.3 quarts or 4.07 liters that was on the service box for the filter and the gasket. Looks to be about what fluid it took. I have guesstimated that amount, but I put about that and it showed full, but I haven't tested it at hot, so it's actually probably going to be low, so it'll probably take a little more than that. But don't overfill it. Fill it up so you get fluid in it, then run it to the transmission till transmission's hot. If your dipstick says hot, even if it doesn't say hot, generally you need to run it and move it a little bit to get fluid everywhere it drained out and get a good level read. And I said, you don't want to overfill it because overfilling can cause problems. There we go. Now it's videotaping. Trying to use a touchscreen with gloves is always fun. Alright. That is where the Speedo goes in. This is the Speedo cable. And if I can get a light somewhere you can see in. But you'll see in there, it's got this spins freely. The cable, that cable spins to work the Speedo. And it connects in up here where there's a thing that spins driven off the transfer case. That, the drivetrain that gives it information at Speedo on how fast the rear drive shaft is spinning, which means the Speedo is going to be off with the tires. It was already off. The even bigger tires are going to make even more off, but it bounces anyway, so it's not like it's accurate. It is leaking fluid from it. And as you can see from this, where it was caked and wet and greasy, well, there may or may not should be an O-ring in here. Well, my solution to try to fix this is get an O-ring in here so that it can form a seal between this washer and this outer piece. And maybe that'll keep fluid from leaking. Or maybe it'll push fluid up so it starts leaking through the Speedo. I don't know, but it's the only solution I can come up with for it leaking out of here, other than capping it off. So that's what I'm going to try to do. I've got one of the O-rings I got to try to fix the other fitting. It may be the right size. I got to push it up using a hook. I'll try to show that if I can. I don't know how well this is going to shoot, because this pod does not like to do angles. So I have no idea if there's even anything you're going to see from this. These are one of the little gasket hook tools. And I'm just trying to push it back in there and see if I can get it to go. And this one may end up being too big too. I've run into everything I've got. It's either too big or too small. Yeah, this is going to be too big too. So, maybe too small. So I've got two more to try. Let's try this one. See if it'll be the right size. Hey, I think it might be perfect. It's right on the cusp. Just right on the cusp. Let's try this other one. It's a big flat washer. Let's try it. That's a little loose, but that's actually good. So that's going to work, I think. Hopefully, we'll see. Then you line that up. Push it down. Get that threaded on. Try to tighten it down. Generally, you do it just about just hand tight, but I'm going to use pliers on it because I want to try to make a seal. And I'm not going to super torque it with the pliers. I'm just going to a little torque it with the pliers. Just get these slip joints to slip a little bit. So there, that's good and snug. That should have compressed that rubber gasket enough that it should seal. So hopefully that'll solve that. But it's also leaking just a little bit from, let me pick this up again. So it is leaking a little bit from around the shaft seal. So I'll still put a little bit of leak stop in this, just to try to rejuvenate, something to rejuvenate those seals, so that I can get enough life out of it that it's they'll last until I'm ready to pull it all out and overhaul it all, putting it before I put it into the other Jeep. So, but hey, that should take care of that. That was the big bleed, and hopefully that'll stop it. So hopefully I've fixed the major bleeds in this transmission drivetrain, and it'll all be good now. At least good enough. Things not perfect, never going to be perfect. So now I got to take the tires off. But and I've got to heat it up and try it for leaks again, but oh, that's a different time. Okay, I don't know if any of that got filmed because it closed and turned itself off. But I was working. I put a rubber gasket in the Speedo cable. It ended up being a flat, like a garden hose gasket. It ended up being what would work. It's supposed to be chemical resistant. I just had to use what I had, and that's what fit. I tightened it down with a pair of, hand tightened it, and then tightened it just a little extra with a pair of slip joints. Be careful not to round it and not to too over tighten it, but enough that that gasket sealed. And hopefully that will stop the leak from it, or at least slow the leak from it, because it all seeps a little bit. And then I will probably try some leak seal in these to see if I can get it to stop bleeding. But it's a slow bleed now, so I can just top it off when I do oil changes and everything. It'll be fine. Actually, probably once a year, and it'll be fine. Because it's been 2 years since I've done it, and the fluid levels, they're still fluid. The transmission was the only thing that went kaplook. So hopefully we've got stuff filmed, and hopefully that takes care of everything. Okay, got it all fixed up. I was going to do a shot of how great it was not leaking, but after I drove it around and warmed it up, it actually took 2.5 more quarts of transmission fluid, I think, because I spilt a quart. Because as I was filling one of those long funnels up, I used the shorter one, and that was a mistake because while I was filling it up, it came out and started dumping on the engine block and down on the floor. And I noticed that when I heard a running sound, that it had come out because I couldn't see because it was behind the hood.
But, what you mean is what had happened was...
Yeah, it went from being nice, clean, and dry to being covered in transmission fluid because I spilt it everywhere. Nice puddle on the engine block, too, I had to clean up. But it looks like I fixed the transmission leak, so that's the good part. It was shifting hard when it was warming up, but that's because it was still probably 2 quarts low. After it cycled and heated up, I put the additional fluid in with it idling. You put it in park and let it idle and check. And like I said, it took about 2.5 quarts, I'm guessing, since I spilt so much of it. And may have taken an extra 3 quarts. I also topped off the transfer case. I was going to do a change on the transfer case because I got the proper fluid for the transfer case, which Brown's not a sponsor, but it's TCL1 transfer case lubricant's what you use in these quad tracks, and that's just in the transfer case, not the transmission. Transmission just uses old-fashioned ATF, the basic stuff, all vehicles. But the ring seals are seeping, as I showed in part of the video there, where it was seeping around the speedo. It's seeping around both drives too, both shafts. And I'm back and forth on whether to drain it and change the O-rings, or to partially drain it, put a bottle of that seal rejuvenator, run it for a little while, then service it at the end of the season before winter, and see if that helps rejuvenate those O-rings. And I'm not sure I can get new O-rings that are proper sized.
Here's to hoping nature doesn't make that decision for you and blows your transfer case out the same way your transmission got blown out.
It was, I drained a little bit out of it and it still looked good. Well, it looks ugly because it's not this nice stuff. It is the ATF that you use in the it's ATF 4 plus limited slip fluid. Because that's what you use for a alternative for this. So it's not exactly what's supposed to be in there, but it's what you had to do. I've only recently found some place that had that. And not a sponsor, but it's BJ's Jeeps. They have a lot of stuff for these old large Jeep models. So that was nice that they had that, and I get it. Not a sponsor, but if they want to be a sponsor, I would not mind it, since how many of these things I work on.
That's true.
So, but other than that, I think it's good. I'm going to run it for a little while. I need to do an oil change on it before too long, not because of miles, just because of the age of the oil. I looked at it, the oil was clean, and I put another quart in because it was a quart low. And I figure I'll run it for a little while, let all that cycle, and decide whether or not I'm going to do the transfer case service. But that's it for this one. So like, share, subscribe. Bless you.
Sorry, everybody. I was trying to hold that in.
And I'll see you on the next project. Have a good one.